So I think the format of this is we're going to go through, I'll ask them some questions, and you guys can ask questions as well, and we'll just hear what they have to say about these different questions. So the first question that we have here is, having an engaged workforce is essential to maintaining and sustaining a strong safety culture. So there are two questions attached to this one. How do you get workers engaged in safety at your company, and what challenges have you recently experienced and had to overcome to sustain that engagement?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So to get people engaged, I think the secret is to bring those people on the journey, get people to start believing that they're part of the solution. We do that by, we really value the everyday improvement, so that small little thing that people can do to make their day better. So leaning on that, pun on words there, but leaning on that lean manufacturing piece of just small everyday improvements. And what we do is we actually give them credits for every one of those improvements that they not only bring up, but if they can implement it on their own and within their team, then we'll give them credits. And when they get enough credits, we let them donate to the community. So where we work, it's a lot of remote, so we have to embed ourselves in the community. So when they can actually go out to the community and say, hey, I've got $500, where would you like us to donate that? It just generates more and more momentum, and they're looking at how they can be safer, how they can, move a valve from here to there, how they can change a valve, put another drain line in, all of those type of things.
For us at RoyOMartin, we've learned that it's got to start in the C-suite. Safety and engagement up and down your organization is dependent on one of your top-level leaders. If they don't have the buy-in, there is no successful safety program from the grassroots level. You've got to start at the top and go down. How do we do that? We did believe in a lot of face time with employees. We do that. We have a quarterly executive safety committee, and in the past, that committee would always meet at our corporate office, usually in conjunction with another executive event or something, and it got kind of stale. And we changed it up now, where we take that and we go to one of our facilities, and we join in their monthly central safety committee, so that those people at every level in that organization sees the executives, in their world, listens to their concerns, and then after that, we'll do our executive safety committee meeting. We always start by reading what's our corporate safety policy, because we want to make sure that we're living up to what that policy is. Even if it's redundant every quarter, we still want to make sure that we're in agreement with that. Once we finish, we'll partner with team members and go out into their workplaces. We'll walk around, we'll do audits, and we really focus on finding the positive. Find someone doing something right and thank them. That has a tremendous impact, much more so than walking out there and trying to find somebody doing something wrong. So that's been quite helpful for us to drive the engagement to all levels of the organization by starting at the top.
Thank you, Terry. I think you addressed the top-down. I'll go bottom-up a little bit. I think in terms of culture, it is very important to have a ritual, and one of the rituals that we have and we reinforce a lot is around reporting. This is nothing new. This has been around for a while. By the way, I'm with SLB, and many of you may know it as Schlumberger. It's a recent name change that we've had, and it's in the oil and gas industry, services. So a slight departure from the procedures could be a life or death situation over here. So we emphasize a tremendous amount on the safety culture, and from bottom up, it's a lot about reporting. We take a lot of proactive approaches. Some of the small examples could be something like a hazard hunt that we have, and we do reward for some of the best hazards that have been identified, et cetera. I don't want to go into systems, but these are some small things that you could do from the grassroots level. And of course, you've got to have the buy-in. You've got to have the management representation and giving a pat on the back. The second part of the question was about the challenge. I think there was a lot talked about engagement. For me, really, it was about post-COVID, if I use that as a marker. It was about post-COVID and the ramp-up that we saw post-COVID. In all the activity in our existing plants, we have about 70-odd plants dotted around the world. And the ramp-up was a big challenge. How do you bring that safety culture to the green hats, as we call them, the new recruits? And in one other place, we had brand new plant, brand new product lines. So how do you do all of that and bring that in? And the biggest challenge I saw was that we counted on our mentors to teach the green hats, and then we realized that they were teaching some of their old habits. And that was not fun. So we had to go back, redo a lot of the safety assessments and the trainings, and train the mentors first, the really senior people, align them, and then that helped us with the juniors, so to speak. So yeah, that was a big challenge, and we're back on track, and I believe it's sustained itself reasonably well.
Yeah, I think obviously recognition programs are super important. You touched on those already, making sure the employees are getting rewarded for those safety observations that you follow up on. But I think really when it boils down to it, you need to engage with the frontline workers on the floor. These are conversations. Make sure you're leading with open-ended questions, not yes and no questions, and really listen to the workers, because they're the ones that know how to get work done. They're the experts on the work. So I think, if you're starting from the basics, definitely go out to the shop floor, whether it's doing a leadership walk, management walk, and engage with your employees. Have conversations with them. Don't turn it into an audit, because that can obviously happen from time to time if you're not really focusing on the people. And not focus on what necessarily they're doing, but their feedback specifically on the processes that you have, so you can incorporate that feedback into your systems. So I think there's really not a one-size-fits-all for workforce engagement. Working from steel manufacturing to Tesla, there's not a silver bullet or one thing that you can do to really get employees engaged, but it's a number of different activities, from leadership walks, safety committees, to recognition programs. Really need a holistic approach to keep your workforce engaged.
Awesome. Cool. And so how has that safety evolution in your company shaped your procedures and policies? And then how are those policies and procedures defined in a particular system at your company?
I don't want to be dramatic, but in the industry that we're in, clearly, like I just said, it could be a difference between life and death, and sometimes these policies have evolved, we like to say, enriched by our experiences, and sometimes those experiences are, as we say, written in blood. Okay, so sometimes you have that evolution, so we've got to remember that there's a lot of experience written up in these policies. So we have our policies. One of the striking things you'll see when you come to an SLB campus is that you reverse park, and if you ever have an accident with, if you're caught, on an investigation with that you were on a cell phone, then you better give up your badge and move on, right? Sometimes it's a stick approach, but these are policies. We have standards. We have about 30 standards that tie back to some of these policies. And then we have what we call books. These are subject matter experts that write these books that detail out these procedures, these standards, sorry, we have about 30 standards that detail out these standards, and then there are procedures that tie back to these books. And it is important that all of this is codified in a management system, right? And like I said, a lot of the previous question was around engagement and proactive approaches, but sometimes you do have incidents, and the management system, through these policies, through these procedures, informs us on how you go about doing some of these investigations. How do you bring that control back? And that's how these evolve. We don't want too much evolution. We want a lot of people adhering to these standards. But this is how we codify into a management system, and then through audits and training, we bring it back, and we try to drive a culture of safety and the right behaviors.
Mm-hmm. So how do you balance sort of then that, evolution of the safety versus really staying solid with what you know and going with those subject matter experts?
That is an excellent question. Look, I would call it more as an evolution than a balance. Mm-hmm. You learn a lot, and there are some things that you know that you have anchored it, i.e. it's in the DNA. For example, you know that people are looking at hazards and starting to report it, et cetera. So when we realize that we have matured in a certain standard, okay, we've done the audits and we find that we're at the point of diminishing returns, that people have understood it, we look at then a risk-based approach. What is the risk? What are the chances of something, of an incident happening, and that's how we evolve. There's no stopping this train. You've got to continuously evolve. But when you know that you've anchored, you've taken this journey, then you evolve based on a risk-based approach.
And I'd like to take that on, talking about the evolution of the safety culture. And if I will step back just a minute, because outside the four guys that came with me, probably the majority of you have no clue what RoyOMartin is or what we do. We're a family-owned, 101-year-old wood and timber products company. We make oriented strand board, plywood. We've made lumber over the years. So it's a very old but very hands-on, in a lot of cases, types of operations. If you look back to about 2000, our company was 80 years old at the time. It had always been family-owned and family-led. That was it. Third-generation CEO came in, and he saw that he was a little more worldly than his father and his grandfather, and he started seeing the need to change that to a family-owned but professionally managed. And a big part of that was the safety, because there was no safety culture at that time. People were considered just an expendable asset. You know, something happened, get you another one. And Jonathan really saw the need. He hired DuPont Safety Systems to come in, and that was really the foundation of the evolution of our safety culture. And believe me, it was quite a thick set of actions that came out of that. I joined the company in 2004, and though they had been at it a few years, we really had not gained much momentum. And we had a lot of leaders in the company who still always say is, they would say, well, we need to get this done, this, oh, yeah, y'all be safe. It was an afterthought. It was not core in what they did. And so when I came on in 2004, I was tasked with getting my facility, up to speed. Though we had policies and procedures, they weren't robust, and they weren't distilled down to a level that team members connected with them. You can go have the big, thick manual sitting on the iDrive or on the shelf or whatever, but until you can take and internalize it to what they do every day is how you have to inspire those people to do it. So I've been there 6 weeks, and this was a monumental event that totally changed the way that our company approached safety and, quite frankly, most everything else. That day, it was the Friday after Thanksgiving. We had a 10-year frontline leader. He was training another up-and-coming young man, and the team leader in training, he convinced Mark, says, look, let me carry the radio, let me answer the calls today. And you just stay in the background. So he kind of begrudgingly agreed, but he did, and came over the radio in a particular area where we processed big logs. There had been a conveyor that was plugged. Well, the team leader in training got on the radio. He says, I'll come over there, we'll look at it, and we'll go from there. Unbeknownst to them, Mark made his way down to that piece of equipment. It has cylinders about this big around that shove up thousands of pounds of wood every given moment. And he crawls up on the framework without following the policy and procedure of lockout, tagout. He got caught, pulled in, and crushed from here down, dying immediately. This was such a cataclysmic event. The CEO had hired this man because he was very good friends with his father. Everyone in the plant knew Mark, and they recognized that could have been them. And as the leadership team, we had tremendous remorse because we've been at this 3 or 4 years with little to no change. Because of this tragic event, though, it brought us to a level of high acceleration and engagement out of pure necessity. And we saw that we had to change. In 2000, our company had, with 850 employees, had 30 recordable accidents. In 2024, we finished with 1,450 employees. We had 4. So that is part of the evidence of the evolution and what it took, in refining all these policies and procedures. And I've got 4 of my team members here, and these men all the time are making sure they're face-to-face with their employees, that they understand what's expected of them, and that they speak that language to them in a way they can understand it.
Yeah, I think from an evolution point of view, just to build from Terry, we've moved to Dyno at all plants and having plants in the US and Australia and Europe. You have a corporate structure for a safety management system. Those books used to be thousands of pages. Now, they might be 6 or 7 pages, much less shell statements, but much more emphasis put on the actual site to implement procedures that satisfy the intent of what the standard is. And then a lot of hard work, and it really feels like a contact sport sometimes, but really drive that culture of safe ground where anybody, whether you're there on day one or you've been there 20 years, has the ability to question why we do something a certain way. Because as these gentlemen have said, you've been there 40 years, you're just doing it the way that somebody else taught you, you're teaching that to the same way. You may never have ever read the corporate standard that was actually written a few years ago. So constantly giving people the opportunity to challenge. And we do that by, we've got QR codes for everything. So you don't have to be brave and go and talk to your supervisor about something. You can simply, I've got 20-year-old kids, they don't talk, they use their phones. They can click on a QR code and type in what they want to, we get to read it, we can go down and base our next audit, our next Gemba on exactly what the feedback has from the guys at the front line.
Yeah, policies and procedures are super important, but do they directly prevent events? They don't. So what we've learned over time is kind of, you may have heard through human organizational performance, the black line, blue line. Has anyone heard of the black line, blue line model before? So black line is work as imagined or planned, as a straight line. It's your work instruction, your procedure. And then the blue line is how work actually happens every day. Because does everything stay the same at a given day for an employee? Conditions change. So the blue line, just think of the blue line overlaying a black line, is this line going up and down. The hazard's down here. So it's really about understanding the blue line is how we're starting to write our procedures. So things are gonna go perfect. We know things will become occasionally non-standard work. So we need to better interpret what is the blue line. How do you learn about what the blue line is? Talk to your employees, your frontline employees. Learn about what their challenges are. Where are their opportunities to improve your process? Then incorporate that feedback back into your new black line, which is really a little bit broader black line that accounts for the normal variability in work. And because of that, you're accounting for that, you're really providing more capacity for your workers. Safety is capacity to do work. So by understanding their challenges, incorporating that ideally in the form of controls, like engineering controls, you're really gonna increase the capacity for your workforce. So when they actually do fail, they're gonna fail safely.
Yeah, that's really interesting, planning for the way it's actually gonna happen rather than some ideal state.
Yeah, humans are fallible to err as humans, so you have to really account for that in your standard work and your work instructions.
Awesome. I think that ties in really well with this next question then, and that is, what approaches have you guys taken to help design or engineer that work to be safe for these humans?
Yeah, I think in our case, we definitely have very, very good manufacturing development procedures. So when you're actually designing from concept to buy off of a manufacturing line, we have various prescriptive procedures and steps that people must follow and certain people must review. I think the challenge for us historically has been we have a good process or procedure on the books, but really enforcing it across a global organization is challenging, and making sure that people are doing and repeating it the same way. And then, make it easier for your design team to make good design decisions by coming up with design guides. So you don't have to have EHS or engineer certain SMEs in every single design review. So if you have things you're doing a lot of consistently over time, you come up with a design guide for installing above ground storage tank. Maybe you're always installing welding cells. You want to have a ventilation design guide. So I think that's not necessarily the solution, but it definitely allows for you to increase your capacity, meaning you don't need to have so many people in every single design review, because eventually you will miss something. So I think having a good procedure for developing either your factory engineering and on the manufacturing side, but also couple that with design guides.
Yeah, Brandon, I think you said it very well. I'll just add a little bit more because I think he talked a lot about manufacturing and how the safety is engineered into it. We have an engineering, manufacturing, and what we call a sustaining team, and it's a concurrent lifecycle management of a product, okay? So in the engineering phase, we have a lot of lessons learned from the previous generation, if you will, or at least something similar that has gone through its life cycle in the operations, in the front line. And so a lot of design for HSE, as we call it, is put in. A lot of effort is put in over there. When it comes to making a prototype, manufacturing actually reserves the right to veto and say, no, you cannot or thou shalt not release this design until manufacturing approves it in terms of ability to manufacture it safely. But once the prototype level is passed, then a lot of other milestones come into picture, et cetera. That's one view where a brand new product comes in and designed for HSE, a lot of manufacturing engineers, a lot of front-end field operations people give that feedback. And then we work on a lot of the manufacturing automation, like Brandon mentioned, to make sure that we can actually make that. The second part of this equation is that if the product is out there already performing and we're making more of a series build, but in the spirit of CI, the people, again, part of the engaging, back to that first question, they're encouraged to submit design for HSE proposals. And the best proposal often is rewarded in a nice way, but that feeds back and we catch a lot of things proactively. Okay, so there's two folds, one for brand new products and one for products in existence.
Yeah, so you're really getting a lot of input from a lot of different parties.
For us, you know, if you look at our manufacturing facilities, the oldest is 1996. We have a 2007, a 2018, and a 2024 vintage facilities. And through each one of those, as we made this conscious effort to expand and grow, one of the first things that we learned to do is sit down before we started a project and say, what did we do right on the last one and what didn't we do well? And try to get as many, you know, stakeholders involved in those decisions. And I would say, you know, as you move through each one of those facilities, you see more and more influence. And then now, you know, the last one has really we had a strong emphasis at the very beginning on safety. But throughout all of our plants now, we have installed and spent several $1 million on elevated catwalks because we don't want pedestrians having to interface with the massive mobile equipment that we use in our facilities. So we give them safe ways. We spend a lot of time on employee access, rigorous guarding. We have a tremendous number of cameras, light curtains, and pressure pads that we're using in safety-sensitive areas. But something as simple as we put local disconnects convenient to the team member where he's working has to lock it out. Where I lived in a former life, everyone had to go to the MCC or the electric center to do a lockout. And most of the people that were going in there weren't certified to be in there to begin with. So we moved that to where they're able to do their area lockouts where they work every day. And those simple things, the forethought and engineering that in from the front has made it much easier and taken away some excuses about, well, I didn't know how or I didn't know where it was.
Yeah. So as you learn these things for your new facilities, do you ever go back and make updates to your older facilities as well?
Absolutely. We continue evolution. That's one of the things we try to, though we're not real big, we try to do real good at best practice sharing amongst safety as really a paramount to us, and we've done a lot of that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think that review is key. So review and then update, and we will do things like 3 months after a new piece of equipment's in, we make a change to a plant, we go back. We not only, in the old days, we'd go back and review, are we getting the products out of it that we needed to? Is it making the money that we said it would make? Now we put another layer on that. You know, what processes, what safety process, procedure, standard do we need to change? And then where do we need to go to our design reviews, build that into those different pieces of machinery that we're building, or
yeah, and just how you measure all that stuff too is pretty interesting. And so our final prepared question here before we go to audience questions is, what are all of the technology bricks that you guys are using in safety, And what are some of the new age developments around the use of AI that you guys can see coming down to workplace safety?
Yeah, I think for us, using a lot of third-party EHS management systems throughout my career, some are good, some are bad. Obviously, a lot of it's all about the team that you have to implement them at your facilities. We're able to have in-house systems and tools at Tesla, which has really kind of taken us to the next level for a number of reasons. One, we can obviously fully customize what we want from whether it's an engagement program, from a learning template to action module, and really taking us to the next level and be able to obviously change things as we learn how we want things to go from a workflow perspective. Obviously, that requires a lot of resources. You need IT department backing. But for us, that's been kind of a transforming to have your own in-house systems and tools. And on the AI side, certainly we're already implementing, human detection, powered by AI. Simple use cases, whether that's quality or EHS, whether that's detecting the door positioning to make sure we're monitoring conditions in a room for like humidity so the product specifications are met. Or we're looking for the presence of workers under a stamping press before the stamping press can be automated again. So really, it's like a limitless future, I think, for AI. I do caution that we apply it responsibly. There's no substitute for engineering controls and elimination of the hazards to begin with. But once you have your full ecosystem, in full operation, definitely can be a very complementary technology to identify hazards using this real vision technology to help you drive risk reduction projects across your factories.
So building on a solid base is important for that.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't want to rely solely on the AI technology, which is extremely powerful, and we're going to definitely fully utilize it. But you got to start with controls, elimination of hazards where you can, and if not, those critical controls, whether it's fall protection or eliminating the fall height, whatever that critical hazard is. But you got to focus on that first, and then it's a good complementary tool to use to reduce risk.
Yeah, well said. It's very exciting to just start talking about AI, but we got to take a step back. And for us, it's all the things that Peter said about integrating, all the feedback into standards, having the laser curtains and having those integrated back. All those fundamental controls have to be in place, and the ability to scale that across your operations. We are looking at it twofold. One is a bird's eye view of the plant, and there we're using AI, and I'll come to that. And the other one is inline. As we're making the products, of course, we would love to use AI to inform us of our quality and other things, but we have actually tried to codify a lot of it into our MES, into our execution system, and try to bring a bit of a connected worker view there, where we bring in a work instruction, for example, for a particular work, and then it calls out what is the PPE, the minimum PPE that's needed. What is the certification that the person needs to have, or the certifications that the person needs to have to even perform that. And sometimes if they're not current, the system will kick that person out. In other words, they will not allow the system will not allow the person to continue with that task. And so on and so forth. Those are some of the controls that we have in place. And you can imagine how much of data you collect as a result of this. The bird's eye view is video analytics. We've started, and of course, at first you get a lot of resistance. Everybody thinks it's Big Brother watching, and it's not really. And then once you get past that barrier, then you apply the video, and it tells you a lot. It's amazing what it can identify once you've again coded in the right sequences to look for. Right now, it's kicking out. It's generating about 40 reports per employee, if you will, per day. So you can imagine the amount of, I don't want to call it violations, but amount of deviations from the black line to the blue line. And so we're now actually building out our large language model. We're tweaking it a little bit to try and get some insights into this. And once we get those insights, we share it. There's no naming and shaming. By the way, the faces are all blurred out. So we understand a lot about handling or lifting or a lockout, tagout, et cetera. And we're able to give that feedback. In fact, one amazing insight we got was about, the 30 standards that I talked about. All of our operations and issues fell into about 6 of them, and no more. That's a powerful insight to have. And then you focus on those 6, and then you grade them by risk, by plant. And then you've got a slightly different set of actions to focus on. So that was a very nice insight. And you get some other insights as well, and you don't know what to do with it. Like a lot of our accidents happen on a Thursday afternoon. I'm not sure what to do other than to beef up a little bit more or something like that on a Thursday afternoon. But you get amazing amount of insight. And this combination of a bird's eye view from an AI perspective to use that, it really, really is very powerful. So it frees up time for people to go and engage face-to-face, et cetera, leaving the AI to do its thing throughout the day. So these are some of the approaches we've been taking.
Yeah, it's really interesting once you get all of that data and then going from having the data to actually making insights off of that in actions.
Yeah, it really helps you prioritize your risks.
Right.
And sometimes discover new risks along the way.
Yes.
You know, for us, you know, we're certainly like these guys in terms of the technology we're using. We're starting to look at AI, but I thought I may hijack the question a little bit and go in a different direction that, you know, I think has been important in the success of ours, you know, because people still want to know you care about them, right? You know, as a leader, they want to know that you genuinely care, and that's the biggest element in safety. And something that our company did a number of years ago that I think helped continue to set us apart is, in 2000, I told you, we had about almost 900 employees. We had 30 plus recordable cases. We were paying $1.5 million a year in workers' comp claims, not insurance, just claims. And put those in $20-25, that's over $2.5 million bucks. And we hired an occupational health nurse, and she came in, and all she was doing at first was just managing those claims and patients that had been hurt in the past. But what she began to do is, between she and the safety manager, demonstrate to the people that we cared about them. She would go to every appointment. She would interface with the doctor. She would talk with spouses that were nervous, upset, or giving them care plans. And that began to really make a metamorphosis about the time that our company was gaining momentum and safety. And we took that principle. Now we have one at all of our facilities, actually two at 2 different facilities, 5 occupational health nurses. Unfortunately, because of the cultural changes we've made, those people are really focusing much more on personal health than they are having to do a workplace injury. And when you have a healthier employee that comes to work and his mind's engaged, then they can be safer regardless of the situation. And one other thing that really was a game changer for us, we started our own medical home. Well, today our company we have our own primary care physician, 2 nurse practitioners, our own pharmacy. And so when someone does get a workplace injury, our first destination is to our doctor. And at first, they were concerned about, it's going to be just the company side, and he's done a very good job of making sure it's patient first and doing what needs to be done. And our nurses have relationships throughout the communities. When they do need to be referred to another medical provider, we know who to go to and who works best, because most of the time, as you know, when you send an employee to an emergency room, they're going to get a lot of stuff they probably don't need. The doctor immediately take them off work when they don't even understand the scope of the work or what you can do to ensure they get back to work. And once someone's taken off work, it can become extraordinarily difficult to get them back. So we work real hard with the patient, with the employee, through these different techniques that's really set us apart. 2024, our workers' comp cost was down to $160,000 with 600 more employees. And something we're very proud of, and a lot of it's because of that very integrated care network that our employees know that we want the best for them.
Yeah, we've also, along with all of the connected worker platforms and what those sort of things can do, and analysing that, we found that from a reliability point of view and making the day easier for people, but also the ergonomic assessments that we've been using some software to do, and then that AI takes all of that data and is able to then predict. That's really driven some high engagement with our people, because again, it's that care factor. It's not don't come to work, don't get hurt. It's let us dive into what you're doing and see where you're getting hurt, where you may get hurt if you don't do something correctly. That sort of stuff has really changed, and build on that safe ground, because it's not get hurt, blame, get hurt, blame.
Awesome. Yeah, that's all very interesting. So that was the end of our prepared questions. I'd like to give the audience the opportunity to ask any questions. If you've got a question, just raise your hand and they'll bring you a microphone. We've got one up here.
I don't have the actual question yet, but I'm going to try to get to it, okay, based on what I've heard. So, number one, thank you for sitting down there and giving us your experience with your different facilities. One item that I guess I would like your feedback on is I understand teaching our mentors the right way. I understand having the right standards and putting the experience and reach the experience and reach our standards with experience. I also understand engaging in the field, listening to the people, bringing it back to our procedures, changing the way we run our business, right? So we can get the engagement and the transparency, and they can see our leadership on the floor. With a facility that has a lot of employees, a lot of turnover, right? Every 3 months we're hiring 10, 15 people, right? Have you experienced that? And where you have experienced it, what kind of safety processes you have in place so that these new employees, when they get on the floor, they're actually safe-minded, they actually look at safety as a core value of the operations, and more than anything is that you can sleep at night going home knowing that these guys are trained the right way and they're actually behaving the right way on the floor at night, on the weekends when leadership is not there or supervision is not there?
Great question. And where my office is at the moment in Cheyenne, Wyoming, we're in a battle with the data centers. So the Microsofts, the Metas, apologies if there's any Microsoft or Meta in the audience, but we have trained their workforce for them. We were the biggest employer other than the state in the town. Our guys are, they're all trained up, but now that money in the data centers has come in at a level that it's been hard to compete with. And they take our guys that, not our top level operations guys, but the guys in the middle. So the guys that have been there 2 to 5 years, we've just spent a lot of money to get them there. We've had to double down on a lot that you just said and be there a lot more. But also what we've tried to do is, and you've got to try and bridge the pay gap and benefits and all those type of things, but try and make them be part of something more than just coming to work. So offer lots more training, but not training that's do that piece, do that piece, do that piece. Put it together, make it a certificate at the end, work with the state to get them a qualification, and just make them feel like it's not just, there's more to the world than making ammonia, because that's what we do and that's what makes money, but that doesn't get people out of bed in the morning, and it doesn't stop them from going down the road when someone offers a better deal.
Yeah. No, excellent question, and I'll get a bit more tactical, and hopefully it's not too long of an answer. When we recruit them, we want to make sure that they go through a lot of initial training. So we have people who are the mentors. We identify mentors early on. We have a lot of training around everything from even driving, because we want our people to be safe, but also a bit of, what are the hands-on experiences in a not shop floor environment, and we teach them in a more safer setup. And we go through a lot of rigor that way. We also want to teach them a lot more about proactive approaches. So even reporting, which we've shown time and again data that a plant that reports a lot actually has fewer accidents. It's impossible to have, we do have almost 73 plants or 73% of our plants not having any incidents, but then one year or another, they've all had some incidents. But we focus a lot on reporting. Then we have commentary task assessments. job safety analysis. We teach them all of these just to make sure that they understand. And they have to break out, or they have to pass all of these before they go independent, and the mentor then certifies after a few months whether they're good to go. Yes, you may argue, well, this takes a lot of time, and we're in a fast turnaround. Yes, but it's not something that we can take lightly. Again, it's risk-based. If it is a task that is relatively easy, taking a wrench and doing a few things, that's okay. But if there's a process-based where temperatures, pressures are involved, we do take the time, and we have to invest that kind of money and effort and time into these people, and then we let them carry on, and then we monitor them, and every year or so they go back and we do a commentary task again. They have to talk and walk us through the task that they're doing. They don't have to memorize, but they have to walk and talk us through, and that makes them aware of what they're doing. So these are some of the things that we keep a very close eye on. Unfortunately, attrition is something that happens. We do compete with some of the other industries that come, but in terms of breakout time, risk-based, those ones that have high risk, we make sure that they put in the time and they're assessed very rigorously before they can pass and run a job independently. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think obviously it starts with new hire orientation, but really you're covering very basic things. So you really need a partner. In our case, we have EHS training and factory training. So partner with factory training, so that first 30 days on the floor, they're reinforcing a lot of the concepts that they learned in new hire orientation. And really, we want them to understand the critical controls that we're using. So what specifically are we doing to protect them? They need to understand that so they recognize when those critical controls are not in place. And obviously, ongoing, reoccurring training, definitely try to do as much instructor-led training as you can. Not always practical with manufacturing, but certainly with the critical programs, whether that's just hazard identification, obviously people doing work at height, making sure they're doing more hands-on training, not just at one time in their career type training. So I think just reinforcing the training over time, but you got to start with a good foundation and new hire orientation. And then we also invest a lot in our leaders. So obviously see where your turnover is at, but if you're having turnover in the associate level, the lead level, invest in your supervisors, managers, so they can really be armed with the knowledge and skills to help manage EHS risks for you. You may not have a large safety team, so you really need your frontline supervisors and managers to have the skill set to really act more or less as an EHS manager at times. And then when you have that turnover, they can quickly get your new employees up to speed, and it's not going to be so heavily dependent upon your one EHS professional or however many that you have in your organization.
Yeah, much like these guys and we've certainly struggled with the turnover. At a couple of our plants, it's been north of 20%. And you take a plant of 700 people, and we're bringing a couple hundred new every year. And those people, we spend a lot of time doing, the old traditional upfront, classroom, trying to educate them on what the terms, what the equipment, what their safety is. But we really transitioned to using a lot more of our own video-based safety trainings, where they can actually see in our plant stuff that they're going to be working on, and through their monthly safety. They're not allowed to work alone, Luke, for at least, how long? 90 days. And they're not allowed to lock out a piece of equipment alone until that period, and they're certified. They know what they're doing. We have at some of our other facilities safety mentors that as a person gets a little further down the road, but they still kind of like the QR code, but it's like they still, 2 o'clock in the morning, not quite sure and they don't want to call their supervisor. They know they can call or go find Joe, and he is designated as her safety mentor, and it's a much less pressure situation. The safety professionals play a key role, and we task them with going around periodically and making sure they really focus on the new team members. But you look at our data, the first 6-month employees really aren't the ones getting hurt. They're scared to death. It's the ones that get complacent. It's that 1 year, that 2 year, that honestly I get more worried about, because they think they know what they're doing, but sometimes they don't, and they take their eyes off the ball. And how do we engage the entire workforce to look out for one another that doesn't happen is one of the ongoing challenges we have.
Testing. All right, we're good. All right. So again, thanks guys for being up here and sharing this stuff with us. My question is specific to something that Ravi talked about, but if you have similar programs, I'd love to hear your feedback as well. But the hazard hunt, do you involve the identifier in the fix where possible? And sometimes that's not possible. And so how do you keep that person engaged in that fix and reinforce those behaviors?
That's a good question. Look, the hazard hunt in general is a proactive approach. And I'm sorry, I'll lead with this and then I'll let you all answer. But it is a bit subjective in the end on the best hazard that you find. But at the end of the day, the whole goal is to train everybody to look for hazards. You know, there was a reference to complacency, and we don't want that, right? That's the fundamental thing. In fact, I'll steal a little bit his answer and build on it, is that complacency is what we're most worried about. And that's why we do proactive hazard hunts. And it's, sometimes you see somebody dominating. It's that psyche, you know, the person naturally has the ability to find those, and some people just don't see it. And it's just to train those. So it's not so much to single out or to reward. We do reward that person, but to use that person who's able to see things a bit different and coach and train the others. I've had this happen to me myself this is my 25th year in the company, but many years in the first few, I had many people, and I wouldn't see half the things they see. And I always wondered how on earth did they see all that? So it's reinforcing the behavior. The more you reinforce that behavior, the more hazard hunts you do, the more it becomes second nature. And that's when the reporting gets that much more crisp, but that much more wealthier in terms of data, right? So it's not about singling out. Overall, I just want to say that what we really want to do with these people is with our teams, is to get them in the moment. Everybody here is in manufacturing, and you know nothing in manufacturing is stable in the sense that every day, every minute of the hour, things change on the shop floor. What you do may not change, but around you, things change. And that's why you need to get that training to continuously look for hazards. And that's it. It's just a whole thing about being in the moment and bringing them and into that training, into that psyche to look for hazards. And that is the goal of the hazard hunt.
Yeah, I think at Tesla, we definitely have different expectations depending on the level of the employee. So a frontline employee, our improvement system's called Take Charge. So you can submit an improvement idea or a hazard ID, then it typically gets pushed to your supervisor. So if you're a frontline employee, we would love for them to come forward with not only a problem, but a potential solution. However, that's not always going to happen, so it's really up to the supervisor and our workflow to help adding the appropriate collaborators to work on a solution for that particular problem, assuming that it's been validated. Now, as you move up the organizational chart, expectations change. So if an engineer is submitting a hazard or an opportunity, we would like to see that engineer provide at least some preliminary solution. And as you move up, expectations are higher. So I think it all depends on the employee, their level in the organization, obviously, how long they've been with the company and their expertise. So that's typically just how we manage things at Tesla is, our expectations definitely increase on if you're going to bring a problem, also bring a solution if you're at certain levels, in particular salaried levels.
One of the things that we also recognized was how hard it can be for a frontline employee to actually register the hazard and actually report that. If I've got somebody and they're out there doing a log round, they may be out there for an hour in a chemical plant. A few months ago, it's negative degrees, they're cold, it's snowing. How do they go back to the supervisor and then go back out again? So we've introduced just a simple, what we call a rip-it book. Simply they can jot it down. If they're using a tablet, they can log it on the tablet. And then we recognize every one of those. So at the end of the week, send out a newsletter. These are the hazards that people have done. And that's just created a momentum where it's almost a competition now to not only recognize a hazard, but recognize a hazard and be able to tell somebody that your team fixed it.
I'll just add, definitely your response as a leader matters. So when people have the courage to submit something, if you don't respond the right way, they're not going to submit anything else, and you're going to lose a lot of information. So like whether that's an event or an injury event or a hazard ID may not be something you necessarily want to see, but your response matters to that. And if you respond with empathy and understand that they're the experts on doing the work at the closest to the sharp end of the stick, then you can get a lot more information. So I think that can definitely be something you can focus on, is making sure your entire organization across the board is responding appropriately to ideas, problems, and events.
We call it's our near miss reporting, and near miss, I know what conjures up in most people's head, but our guys, it's kind of really hazard identification all the way through an actual near miss. And the biggest element of that is the people giving the team members feedback. Even if it's nothing but thank you so much for showing us that, or real corrective, we'll kind of grade them, and based upon the severity, we'll do an RCA on some of those, just as if someone got hurt, and improve our policies, procedures, and systems. We do that quite often, but the biggest element, that's what we've talked about, is the team member has to feel empowered that what he's saying is worthwhile, and getting them that feedback. Sometimes you have to be very delicate and saying, well, we're probably not going to be able to do that, or this is a way, it may be, but, it's just about being a good leader there. But that one-on-one feedback and relationships is what makes those successful.
Awesome. Are there any more? Oh, we got one more audience question up here.
Well, congratulations on all the compelling stories that you've told today. A lot of really good, advancements on your safety journeys. One of the things when I think about manufacturing, I think about how dynamic it is, and how do we talk about lagging indicators after the fact, great improvements on workers' comp cases, things of that nature. But there's a lot that goes into getting there, right? So I'd like to learn from you guys. What are you doing from a standpoint of leading indicators or benchmarking? Have you done anything like tracking dollars invested in safety up front? I heard the case of an occupational health nurse, things of that nature. Are you doing anything along those lines to look at how we're tracking your performance so that you can predict continued success in the future by investing in a certain way? So what are those leading indicators that you guys are actually using, or benchmarks?
I can take this one. So for Tesla, we are, as far as our leading indicator, I mentioned Take Charge, which is our employee improvement idea, hazard ID system. So our main global #1 leading indicator for safety is our submission rate. So we look at the number of submissions per person per year. So that's our #1 leading indicator that we can trend over time. And obviously, once you submit a Take Charge, what's the important part? That someone looks at it and you have action assigned if appropriate. And we also track the action closure rate for Take Charges that have an action assigned. So we also trend that. So that's the primary leading indicator. And on the lagging indicator side, we've actually moved away completely from OSHA record keeping. As far as we do the OSHA record keeping, but it's not something we even share with the leadership anymore. So we'll do the record keeping. We now focus on ASTM, which is a global harmonized standard for occupational injury and illness classification. So we actually focus on ASTM rate, which is a better measure of serious injuries than OSHA TRIR. So we've actually moved away from it. We're still doing the record keeping. So in a given event, we'll classify each one in accordance to OSHA and also to the ASTM standard. But the ASTM rate is what we're actually socializing now with our leadership.
Yeah, I think in terms of leading indicators, everything that was just said about reporting rate, that is fundamental. I think we even have objectives on how much we want every employee to report and the quality of reporting. And that has improved over years, first few years, especially in a plant with a lot of new employees or a lot of turnover. You have to expect the quality is not so great, but if you keep on giving that feedback, the quality definitely improves, and that helps, right? You want to capture all the near misses or everything at the bottom of the pyramid, and hopefully the incidents will be very, very limited at the top of the pyramid between a major or a catastrophic, and hopefully never a catastrophic. But overall, those are some of the fundamental, everything I talked about, the job safety assessments or commentary task assessments, these are all logged into our system. So we have ability to mine the data and understand what kind of hazards or what kind of risks exist per plant. And so we're now pivoting to another leading indicator, which is we've divided it into focus, control, and lead. We want every person to lead. And that focus, control, and lead is based on a risk-based study that's an outcome of all of this data, and we're using analytics to help us understand where to focus. And then that becomes the objective for the years, at least for year 1 and year 2, to try and understand, are you able to focus on that risk? What are the controls you're putting in place, and how do you lead as a person to have that, so that every person in the plant is aware of their top risk for that plant. And the lagging indicators are the lagging indicators, I'm sure you know, from recordable injury frequencies to accident rates, et cetera. But yes, we want to keep that focus on leading indicators.
One of the leading indicators that really changed the attitude of my management teams is measuring the time between when a hazard goes in and then when the action to mitigate that hazard, how long is that time? And when I first started bringing that into the management meetings, management teams just amazed at how long it is. Like sometimes the average can be 300 and 400 days as an average. And as they start to bring that down, that just drives that attitude of we're going to put it in, we're going to do something about it. Teams believe you're going to do something about it, and it's just a snowball effect.
Yeah, I think just going back to our take charge system, if you're interested in the workflow, so to your point, someone submits a take charge, it's a hazard. So our current workflow is it gets escalated after 2 weeks. So we track how many take charges are unaddressed greater than 2 weeks. Now, obviously you can fine tune that for the number of take charges or submissions you have for your organizations. But that's currently how we're doing it. And then it'll escalate to the next management level, and it'll keep escalating all the way up to E if we need to.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a great talk. We're out of time for that one, so everyone join me in thanking Peter, Terry, Ravi, and Brandon.
Thank you.